The group was run by Olga Kennard, who was essentially, I think, a medical research council person who'd been seconded to Cambridge to create an organic crystallography research group under the aegis of Lord Todd, the Nobel laureate, who was head of organic chemistry at the time. The people I interacted with most in the group were Sam Motherwell, Neil Isaacs, Bill Town, and David Watson. They were the sort of four that I interacted with most. But there were others who came not long after that. So Paul Roberts appeared not long after I'd arrived simply to do crystal structures as a service to the department. Yeah, so that I think was really the scientific side of it. However, you've got to remember that the CSD was being built as well at the time. So we had clerical staff and scientific staff who were doing that, and if we listed those, I mean, there was Stella Weeds, who was the abstractor. She received all the papers and abstracted the information that we required. There was a certain amount of clerical work required to keep the records straight, and that was David Watson's wife, Sherston Watson, did that. But she didn't work in chemistry. She worked in another office in Cambridge at Lucy Cavendish College. And then Olga had this amazing series of people who did data input, even people with very large, heavy card punch machines in their kitchens, entering the data for the embryo database. So that was the sort of milieu that I joined. Certainly different from the lab I was in Vancouver. Yeah, well, we had a perennial visitor at the time who came every year, and that was Lodovico Riva, who unfortunately died last year, but was most famous in the end for creating the Erice schools. He'd been a postdoc in Cambridge for 2 years in the mid-60s. But it seemed that every time the swallows arrived in the trees, Lodovico would arrive for 2 or 3 months each summer. And he was great to work with. Another person who we had for quite a while was Alan Larson, and who impressed me no end. Alan was one of the doyens at the time of crystallographic programming. Very taciturn, but very knowledgeable American, who said very little, but when he said something was extremely valuable. He came from North Dakota, and we used to remark that very few people got out of North Dakota and so on, but he was great. He used to wander around behind you and read the code you were writing, and then he would wander off saying bad code or good code on a good day. But he was very influential in getting us to write actually good code. Apart from that, one of the guys that was most interesting was a guy called Viswamitra from Bangalore. And Mitra used to come and perform amazing crystallization experiments. He was a world expert in crystallizing things, but he could never tell you how he did it. And conversations with him were always very interesting. So those three stick out from that period. In the new building phase, I think we've had a couple of people here who've been quite influential. Joel Bernstein, who was here in 92 to 93 for a year, when he was writing his book on polymorphism, and Gautam Desiraju, who followed him a couple of years later and spent 2 or 3 months here. So we've had some really good visitors who've been extremely valuable to the development of the centre. We interacted quite a lot, of course. In those days we were in chemistry, we were housed there for 20 years, and we certainly interacted with quite a lot of the staff there. We did crystal structures for Dudley Williams, Tony Kirby, Stuart Warren, Lord Todd, and so on, and they brought their own interesting bits of chemistry to us. One that stands out, of course, is Jack Dunitz, who spent a year as visiting professor of organic chemistry, and spent quite a lot of time with us. Another was Roald Hoffmann, who went on to win the Nobel Prize in theoretical chemistry in the mid-80s. Roald spent time also, and he became very interested in using crystal structure information to validate, back up, whatever you want, to his theoretical calculations. So he was quite a live wire at the time. So throughout our time in chemistry, we certainly interacted with, a lot of people who came to the department as such, but found us to be an interesting group of people to interact with, I think.